Hello and welcome. Welcome to the Earth, Sea, Love podcast. This podcast is for and about women of colour and our relationship with nature. Hosted by me, Cherie Mack. The Earth, Sea, Love podcast is committed to exploring the experiences of women of colour with Mother Nature. We want to provide spaces where the hidden voices in the environmental and conservation conversations can explore their relationship with the natural world. Inspired by our time spent outdoors, we amplify the voices of women of colour, our stories, our conversations, interviews, photography, writing, and artwork. We'll be exploring our legacies, histories, and memories which have had an influence and effect upon how we perceive ourselves within the natural world and within the environmental and climate justice movements. The Earth, Sea, Love podcast is a space for women, feminine, and non-binary people who are Black, Indigenous, people of colour to explore their relationship with nature. Thank you. Hello, beautiful people. It is Cherie here, and I am welcoming you back to the Earth, Sea, Love podcast. Yes, you haven't heard from us since July 2024. We've been on our summer hiatus, but we've still been busy. We've been busy popping up here, there, and everywhere. It's good to be back. It's good to be back for a little bit of the autumn season. The autumn season is my season. This is my birthday season. I've been getting cozy over here, making sure, we're keeping warm, but still managing to get out there and get some walking and kicking of the leaves, which are my favorite things to do. But so welcome back to the 69th episode of the podcast. And I'm saying the number and marking the occasion because this is a special episode. This is our first episode where it was recorded live with an audience in a face-to-face conversation. And for me, as the host over these last 4 years, it's always been done virtually, man. We meet on Zoom, or in the beginning, I'm sure it was Skype. So to have this opportunity to do this episode face to face, well, I am truly, truly grateful. And how did this come about? I hear you ask. Well, back over the summer when I was at the Tremula Festival, I was invited to come along to the first ever audio festival that was happening in Brighton in September. That was about audio, getting outdoors, and activism. This was the Tremula Festival that was set up, organised, really well managed by Francesca Torowski, who's the founder and lead producer of the Tremula Network, which put on the festival. I am so grateful to Fran because from the invitation from Fran, they also put me into contact with the special guest of this episode, Alinah Azadeh. And it was such, it is still such, because, you know, I felt that we have known each other ages, but we only just met recently through an email, and then we met face to face for the festival. And, you know, the conversation just flowed. It was powerful. We've got so much in common. It's all about how Alinah is out there creating stuff, writer and artist, but how she puts in this hard work to get the funding to do it, these projects, getting to be the writing residence for Seven Sisters of the South Down National Park, but not selfishly keeping it to herself, but like opening up the conversation, opening up the opportunity to other global majority creatives to be part of the project. And what was created was We Hear You Now. And this is a spoken word audio walk, which was commissioned, and it's embedded on benches, signposts and gates across 6 kilometres of the Seven Sisters and the Sussex Heritage Coast landscape. And it was curated and written together in a collective. And of course, we got the links all in the show notes for you to go and to listen to this online. But even if you get that chance to get along that Sussex coastline and hear it in situ, my gosh, that would be amazing. That would be absolutely amazing. So we discussed this project. We discussed Alinah's childhood with nature. We discuss what's been happening, developing with this project, the legacies that have been left, and also that racialized criminal damage that happened to this project. So I'm so excited and honored to be sharing this episode with you. It was so inspiring. And to do that in a live audience and have them ask questions and have that interaction. And then, as I say at the beginning of, this is what Earth, Sea, Love podcast is all about. That connection that we have with the nature, that connection we have with ourselves, but also that connection that we have with each other. Just enjoy it, man. Just enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it, just hit us up with a comment, man. And of course, share it far and wide. Okay, that's enough from me. Let's get into this episode. Welcome. Enjoy. Bye for now.
Our next podcast coming up is the amazing Earth, Sea, Love podcast, hosted by the wonderful Dr. Cherie Mack. Earth, Sea, Love podcast is a space for women, feminine and non-binary people who are Black, Indigenous and people of colour to explore their connection to nature. Today, she's going to be joined on stage by the local writer, artist and activist, Alinah Azadeh. Can you please give them a very, very warm welcome?
Is that the red one or red?
Red is good. The yellow one. The yellow one.
Thanks kindly.
Thank you so much.
Good.
Okay. All right. So, thank you for that introduction. And yes, I am Dr. Cherie Mack, and this is the Earth, Sea, Love podcast. And this is our first live recording. So I've taken, I know, 4 years in existence. And this is our first face to face. But I've taken off my shoes because I'm usually not dressed. When I usually don't have much clothes on when I'm recording the podcast. So if you can't tell, I'm very excited about this conversation. Very excited. And I have to first of all thank Fran here. Thank you. Let's hear it for Fran. Thank you for the invitation, but also, much more importantly, thank you for introducing me to Alinah. It is an honor and a pleasure to have this conversation with Alinah. She wasn't on my radar before this, but she is now. All right, so as I say, it's an honor, and the Earthsea Love podcast is all about connection to nature, to ourselves, and each other. So, as my great Nana Rosa used to say, before we set off, Alinah, how you fizzing? How you fizzing?
Right now?
Yes.
Yeah. I feel a bit weird doing this without any grass under my feet, or and sort of wanting to take my shoes off too. I'm doing good. It's nice to see people that I know here, and we've spoken online, so it's good to see you in person. It is. Yes. Much to chew over together.
Cool. Well, usually, as I say, we do this virtually. And I usually ask the first question is, where are you calling in from? Let's situate ourselves. And it's still relevant here because it's a way of bringing us to the present moment.
Yeah.
So can you tell us, Alinah, where are you calling in from?
We are in Brighton. We're right by the sea. And we're about 5 minutes or so walk from the beach. And if you walk east, which is where I sort of tend to walk, you come to the Chalk Cliffs, the coastline, the Seven Sisters, the South Downs, the Chalklands. And then if you go back inland, you come to where I live, which is in Lewis, which is a little market town encircled by the South Downs. And it's a very soft landscape, not like the one that you're from. You got there.
Harsh. We've got wind. Is it windsill? Windsill, which is very hard and indigenous, and it crops out at weird shapes.
Yeah, we've got the rolling shaped, the softness and the springiness when you walk, and the skylarks and all of that. It's quite a soft landscape, I feel. But then you also got it's a landscape that's disappearing. So you got the coastline, because it's chalk, it's soft, so it's disappearing. So it's always changing. So that point of change between the land and the sea is the one that I am inspired by, and kind of alarmed by at the same time. Duality of that environment.
And / both, as we were saying.
And / both.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you for that situation. And I've noticed it's a bit chalky down here, where we're used to it being a bit harsh, as we say up north. But let's just move on a little bit. You've noticed I haven't introduced Alinah. I haven't said what she does or who she be. And that's what I like more. That's who you be. And that is, you can answer that in any way you want, but in the sense of, I'm not here to define you or put you in a box or limit you at any point. If you want to, however you want to describe who you be is welcome here.
Oh, okay. Where do we begin? Human and more than human, being part of the more than human world of nature. A walking artist, a writer, a meanderer. I think I'm a kind of crafter and nurturer of stories that have been maybe untold, overlooked. An amplifier of voices that have been minoritized, should be much more, I feel, vocalized. So I work with audio, hence we're an audio festival. I guess I'm also, a kind of quite a probably dualistic, a strong person, quite a fragile person. I'm a neurodivergent. So I meander. I meander in the downs, but I also meander in my creative mind. So I used to work a lot with textile. So I like to work with text, weaving, interweaving ideas, creating big webs of projects and then finally finding the path, very slowly down the line, not quite always knowing where I'm going, but I know it's going to make sense at some point, and often involving communities of people with whom I want to walk alongside since the walking practice, which has only been the last 5-6 years. Used to do a lot of stuff in museums and galleries, but it always involved storyteller and a poet, and also like non-fiction, and I was initially a visual artist mainly, and reading that right now, my palette, I suppose, is the outdoors, is the landscape, and a lot of my work has form in words or audio or performance, but that can change. So I'm quite fluid in the way I operate. And I'm a mother as well, so grown-up children, and what else?
Oh, that's a lot.
Not enough.
Yeah. But hey, more than enough.
Good. Activist, cultural activist, in the sense of really feeling like my activism, I think, is through the cultural sector and through my cultural work with people and through my own voice as well. And so, that's the place. Gently radical work.
Cool. Radical coming up again. But radical is the root of the word. I'm sure Latin is seed. It is related to plants. Radical. Yeah. With an E on the end. Yeah. Tidbit for you. But yeah, so I like that last conversation was mentioning meandering as well. And meandering, I think, is us taking our cues from nature, that wisdom. So let's talk about that nature connection. And let's talk about your nature connection through some projects that you have initiated. And I'm particularly thinking here about first, we see you now, and also we hear you now. If you could expand on what those projects were, what they entailed, etc.
I like your style. So back in 2018, I got a little bit of R&D money from the Arts Council. I had this real sense that I wanted to go out to the coast, and I wanted to go to the place where my mother, she migrated to the UK, to Eastbourne, so the coastal area, from Iran in the 60s, and she had a real attachment to the coast and this landscape. And she also died in the sea, and so her ashes were cast in one of her favourite bits of the coastline near Eastbourne called Burling Gap, which is an amazing beach. And I had this thing, I wanted to go write a story or wander around, maybe devise a performance, something, because I had been absolutely provoked and outraged by the Brexit vote and the kind of shift in identity status that was sort of shaking up, and everything was going on with that. And I wanted to sort of explore restorying through probably a piece of fiction, but I didn't know, speculative fiction, imagining. And so I went for this walk, and I walked in the visitor centre there, and there was a line on the ground, and it said 2053. And I said, "Oh, what's that line?" They said, "Oh, that's where the water will have come to by 2053. So as in, this will have disappeared completely." So, and I was quite shocked by the rates of change. And now, in fact, that has been closed off because it's so close, it's dangerous. So they moved the whole thing to the back. So I just ended up writing this story set in 2053 about a young girl of migrant heritage on the cliff. In that story was the seed of the vision of this big project that I then devised and led as part of a residency that I was given with the Seven Sisters in South Wales National Park. On the back of that one, sharing that one story, it's called, it's a prologue story, so I can read a little bit of. Yeah. And I realized that I was feeling simultaneously with kind of a grief walk with my ancestor, when I'm up with my mum, and also I was just blown away by the beauty and the wonder of feeling really at home in that landscape, on one level, and a bit uncomfortable and uncertain as to whether I still belonged as well. So there's this strange duality. So the piece that I wrote, which is a kind of conversation between the chalk cliff and this young girl, and the cliff kind of begins to speak, was a sort of response to that discomfort and that wanting to reimagine a way of kind of, in a way, reclaiming that piece of coastline through my own ancestry and trying to feel at home again, I suppose. And it became a provocation for We See You Now, which was then a walking writing program with writers from global majority backgrounds, and then led to We Hear You Now, which is a sort of quite a major audio walk of speculative story and poetry and new myth by 11 writers who were part of a program of around 40 who were involved over 2 years. So what was the question?
Nature connection. But before we go any further, let's hear a few words.
Oh yeah, let's read the story a bit
from the prologue.
Just a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is a short excerpt, and it can be heard. Well, we'll talk about where it can be heard.
Yes, we're getting there, sweetie. We're getting there.
Yeah. Okay. So it's an encounter in 2053 between a young traveller and the chalk cliffs, which brings an unexpected change in the landscape. So this is a little section. Although these chalk cliffs were a ghost nation of minerals, they still hungrily absorbed the remains of shell and bone of insects, animals, and, with the Anthropocene, of humans. Humans who had arrived on and populated this land over millennia. Humans who had drowned in the many shipwrecks and other misadventures along this coast, falling and sinking into the shifting, inky blue waters. More recently, the cliffs had noticed those trying to reach the shore further east on fragile boats, when all other routes to seeking refuge on this island had closed. An undercurrent of pain swelled against the sides of the cliffs every time they felt the soft limbs of a body against them. It was around this time that they realized, not since the era of war and attempted invasions, had they been given an identity which was alien to them. They had become a hard border, a site of violence again. Their tears bled into the sea, and its temperature rose. This continued for decades. And then, one late spring afternoon, a lone traveller to Haven Brow lay down to rest, settling far back enough from the cliff edge to safely take in the panorama of ocean, chalk, and sky. The traveller, a girl, had walked for several hours and taken a new route that day, determined to discover a part of the coast that was unknown to her as yet. Close to falling into sleep with her long, jet-black hair let loose on the grass, walking boots encrusted with mud, and the rosy afterglow of sunbeams on her olive skin, she drew a sharp breath in and sat up. No, it couldn't be. She looked around to see if anyone was approaching. She was definitely alone. And then it happened again, the echo of voices emanating from the ground below. A mixture of fear, disbelief, and excitement surged through her body as she strained her ears for greater clarity. I think that's enough of a taste.
You can online at the moment. It is with your Substack. You can read the whole prologue extract on your Substack.
On the Seven Sisters website.
Yeah. Because that's where I read it first. And what we've got there, we've got liminal space there with the coastline and the sea line. And we've got that idea of belonging and history. And I go to the sea to have that conversation with my ancestors, those who come before me, those travellers. But let's think about this project and the legacy. Let's think what has been created from the projects, which were we see you now, we see here now, and we hear now.
We see you now, we hear you now. I know, I get you.
The legacy, the creation. We were saying like what's along the coastal line.
Okay.
And what actually happened to these creations.
So there's two kinds of legacy, I think. One is a human one, which is all the relational work which was that I was walking on my own and I knew I needed to walk with others and then create a kind of cohort of people. One of whom is here, Sheila. And so, and also one of the other things was that I was offered this residency on the back of that story and on the back of my idea of running it was all through COVID, by the way, so there was lots of online hybrid spaces of exploring the landscape, notionally sometimes, or getting people to go out on their own and then coming back in. Then when we met up and ran a series of outdoor retreats where we asked the questions that I've been asking myself, which are around belonging and origins and ancestors, but also using the metaphors of the landscape, the horizons, and thinking about change because of the change of the landscape, and thinking about our own edges and our own backgrounds and how that they've been shaped, how our response to landscape has been shaped by our own cultural heritage. And so there's a relational thing. So what I said to National Park when they offered me the role was, and they were interested in, was to develop a community. And that was in liaison with Writing Our Legacy, who are a network of diverse arts and heritage writing and arts network, grassroots, now NPO. And then what I said was, this would be one project, but there needs to be many. And they had a really good long view of that. So I connected them in with person who runs Writing Our Legacy, and now there are lots and lots of projects and bursaries that have been given, and many, many things going on. The National Trust have run a thing called Changing Chalk. Many of the writers that I've worked with now run their own projects. And so me, that's a really important legacy. And also a writer group that came from it. So close friendships and critical review of work, and, when Black Lives Matter, and so it's like crises, in crisis, it was like a human web in a way, kind of a weave. And for me, that's a really important thing, because I no longer feel alone when I'm out there. I know that, we've walked together. Second legacy is that I got funding, Arts Council funding, to run that. The National Park put money in. Then I said, my vision was of the voices that came out from the cliff, if we could really embed some actual voices with new stories. And wouldn't that be amazing when you walked along the coast and you heard different kinds of stories, that challenged your perceptions and the tropes around the rural spaces and the kind of iconic ideas of the kinds of stories that were there already about that coastline and about Englishness and the countryside and all of that. So I basically curated and helped to put together a new collection of work, of which Sheila's is one brilliant one. And then we recorded it, and then it was basically installed on a series of listening posts. So they're like on benches and fence posts and other kind of existing furniture, because it's hard to put anything new in that landscape. It's protected. So along 6 kilometers of the coastline, and they're not an easy trail. The idea was actually not that it was easy necessarily to find it. They're into places where I wanted people to come and discover that I had discovered that felt off limits to me often. Like I didn't really know if there was private land or public land, but hey, it's a national park land. Oh, I can be here. Wow, I can cut into the middle of the Seven Sisters and I can write a story, and people could come here and then they could come and see this amazing space that I felt was off limits. So the idea was what the story was. It was both a story, but it was also an invitation to come into the different kinds of landscape that weren't, maybe didn't feel like they were welcoming to this community that I was wanting to work with and as part of, because there were certain levels of discomfort, previously difficult experiences of rural racism, or there were many, many complex feelings about going out into that landscape. And it's not very far from the city, but it is a very different kind of space. And so that was launched as an audio walk last year, and then we got some backing to basically perform it and present it, and in festivals, and the Brighton Festival, the Chalk Festival, online. We ran workshops. We did very open public workshops, and people wrote their own work, and so loads and loads of work has been written in response. So that audio walk was kind of a provocation as well for other people to think differently about that space, to think differently about, the lighthouse that sits there, and the shipwrecks and the bits of, World War One and Two, the remnants there, and and about Commonwealth soldiers up at Seaford, and just so each writer took something and they worked with that and their own sense of belonging or not belonging to the land, and created a new piece of work. It's beautiful work. So it's basically installed, and the idea is it's there for 5 years and online. ...
So you've got these listening posts, you're opening up a landscape in a number of different ways. You're restoring it, reimagining it. What has happened to this listening post since it's been in post? Let's think about, is it 13 posts or that have been?
It's 14, 13, 14 with an intro, yeah. So it runs around, if anyone knows Cookmere Valley as a visitor centre, Seven Sisters Visitor Centre. It begins kind of there, it runs around up and around the Cookmere Valley. It goes from Seaford, which is a town along the coast, and up and over Cookmere Valley. Then it goes up onto the first of Seven Sisters, Haven Brow, where this story that I wrote is set. It goes over the Seven Sisters, over up to Beachy Head, which is kind of also another famous landmark place. Ends there on a bus stop. There's a story about a bus journey. Brilliant. Story by Jenny Harach. So that was launched, and we celebrated and we walked in last June. And then about a month ago, I was up on Haven Brow up for a kind of a photo shoot, and it's for an article that I wrote for. It's called Countryside Country Voices. It's a national.
Country Life?
No, it's not country. It's something like that. It's a Country Voices, Countryside Voices. Yeah. So that and the whole atmosphere of the shoot was, celebration and inspiration and belonging, and I said to the person taking the photo, let me show you my listening post, because my story is just over there. We walked over the listening post, and it wasn't there anymore, and it had been unscrewed, and the screws put back on, and I was like, that's weird. And my sort of heart sank, because I had this sort of sense. They went down to the next one, Akila Richards' beautiful Twilight Portal story, missing. And then basically someone had gone around the whole of the coast, unscrewing all of the stories and stolen them, basically. And there's been some graffiti near the visitor centre. So basically, they tried to erase the project in a kind of absurdly literal way that you can't,
You laugh.
We
laugh.
I'm laughing
we
now.
smile.
I was enraged. I've been enraged, and I've been very, very upset, and we've all been very upset.
Yeah.
And I laugh now. It's a strategy, really, because as one of the writers said, the idea that you can steal a story is an interesting one to kind of think about. And what does that mean?
Well, it's been happening for centuries, has it not? Stealing, erasing our stories. Let's get this in context. That's a traumatic thing to happen, in the sense of like the heart, the guts, the time and energy that went into creating these stories. To purposely unscrew, take the plaques, but put the screws back in. You've got to give them credit, ingenuity there, just in case you did miss it, the screws. But let's just think, yesterday, the South Downs National Park Authority came out with a press release about this incident. Do you want to share with the listeners what was, like, a snippet of what was said, but then also how you feel about what was put out there by the National Park Authority?
Well, what I'd like to say is that, because it's relevant to anyone else doing these kind of projects across the country, of which there are many, not necessarily photo projects, but being present in these spaces. Yeah.
Yeah, Black Nature in Residence.
Yeah. What I'd like to say is that what was amazing for me is that, because it wasn't just my project and it was obviously a collective of people who were involved, was that, of course, the immediate thing was, how does everyone feel and what is the impact, and absorbing that. And then let's feed in our ideas and thoughts and feelings to the national park. Because the person that I was mainly working with, the cultural heritage leader, Nishka, who's also British Iranian, was really amazing to work with and a real champion. It was also an attack on her, and that project, and an attack on the park. So there was this sense of like, it's everyone's problem, which I liked immediately. But there was it could have been a kind of just a dismissal of vandalism, and it clearly wasn't that. And so what we did was we basically fed in 6,000 words worth of our thoughts and feelings, but initially, which was it has to be called out as a racist act. It's really, really important. It's not dismissed. And I know you have to tread carefully because of what's been going on over the summer with the violence, and maybe this is another form of that. But it's really important to be clear about that. And so, to be fair to them, they have responded really well, and they asked us to give them cues as to how they should deal with it. The main thing was that it's a criminal act to get the police involved and get the police to make a statement as well that backs everything up, which is now out as well. So what they've written actually, I think, is really strong. It doesn't shy away from what, the reasons why the person may have done that, probably has done that, certainly has done that. And it stands behind us and with us, and it's a captive of everybody, because these news stories were for everyone. So that's just been put out yesterday. So what happens with that now, we'll see. But I think it's an example of good practice. But then what do you do with that? And they've reinstated they've screwed in. They're reinstating the whole thing, quickly, which is also good.
I think what you said there is about it being good practice, and I think it does need to be shared far and wide. Because as I mentioned that I'm a project coordinator of a project which is called Black Nature in Residence. So that's 5 global majority creatives in the 5 northern national parks. That's Northumberland, Lakes, Peak District, Yorkshire Dales, and the North York Moors. And this is a Black-led project. What that means is that we got the money and we went to the parks and said, you're invited to come on board if you want. We don't want any money. We just want your logo, because that looks good for funders. Yeah. But I keep repeating, it's a Black-led project. It's a Black-led, but it's difficult to translate that into practice. Yeah. And what we've come up against is when we're using specific language, like for people of color only, for global majority creatives, the comms department in the parks don't find that as positive language. They like to dilute it and say diverse audio instead. Yeah. And we've had to push back against that, to the point that they've made the decision of not sharing the project, not sharing the events, the workshops, because they're afraid of the backlash. And they have cited the recent riots, and I think the recent riots are just something that's been under the surface for centuries, and it's just boiled out, and they can see it now. But my question, there is a question, honestly there is, I'm not just plugging blacknatureinresidence.com, but the question is that press release, I want to share it.
Do you want me to read some of it?
Please. I want to share it, and I want.
Oh, share it, yeah.
Yeah, and I want to use this as good practice for the rest of the parks, the national parks that we're dealing with, because it's fueled at the moment by fear. They're fearing that racists, fascists will push back and write stuff on social media that they can't control. But at the flip side for me is that they're also missing out on a tip of getting positive solidarity messages at the same time. And how are we going to stand together if it's not being put out in those networks? So please share some of them words.
Well, do you want to share some of it? Yeah, because actually one of our, we put in lots of thoughts and ideas. And one of them was, well, this one of the ways to support this, apart from putting it all back and calling out for what it is to amplify the work. Because anyway, it's hard to get platforms for this kind of work. Even if you've got, which I got some major Arts Council funding, like you went to the park and all of that. And so it's to amplify the work, people to listen. People will see the description of something and they'll make judgments about what it's about. And if you go into our work, it's this whole, it's a beautiful body of work, I think. So the National Park Authority is deeply saddened and appalled that a walking trail featuring fantastic stories from writers of global heritage, sharing their love for and connection with South Downs, have been vandalised, and explains how they've done it. The trail celebrates the deep connection that local writers of global heritage have with the landscape and has been enjoyed by thousands of people from all walks of life, each with a shared love for the national park. It's this thing of shared...
Landscape for all.
Yeah, because that's their policy, landscape for all. So, and then they recognise that it's racially motivated, they're reinstating it. And then national parks are created for the benefit of the nation, have always been for everyone to enjoy. We are a national park for all, and we'll continue to celebrate the voices of everybody and embrace the full spectrum of all our communities as we work together to tackle the nature and climate crises that are impacting us all. And we'll do so with great pride. Then it talks about being a welcoming landscape, experienced by anyone, contact the police, bring offenders to justice, etc. So it's that sort of vibe. And then it explains about just how much more of a project this was. So it was funded by Arts Council, England and the National Park. And then we had all these supporters, so it cites them. So the idea is that they'll hopefully, when we tell them about it, they will then amplify. So Writing Festival, Writers Mosaic, Writing Our Legacy, New Writing South, Town at Eastbourne, Charleston Trust, University of Chichester, Brighton Dome, Judy's Bicycle, Colour Green, which is a kind of an international climate justice, climate change hub. And it grew out of a creative programme aimed at creating a legacy for minoritised voices, connections and perspectives on the Sussex landscape. So then the police have a quote, which is the expression of the arts as part of... I was quite impressed by this from the police.
I knew it was from the police.
I was quite impressed.
It was.
Yeah. And what to say is there's quite a lot of dialogue between the head of comms...
It seems like they got it.
But they were taking on what we'd said. So there was an integrity around... We're transmitting the emotion actually of what taken place. The expression of the arts is part of what sets us apart as a species. Whether written, sculpted, painted, sung or performed, art is an interpretation of an artist's vision. This incident involves the theft of 13 plaques, each offering a unique window into the inspiration drawn from the landscape of the South Downs National Park. While some may see this as merely the theft of pieces of plastic, it is in fact the theft of artistic expression. The fact that someone chooses to steal plaques from this particular trail, which features work by female writers from Black and global majority backgrounds, is a detestable act that deprives others of the enjoyment of these incredible works. I urge anyone who witnessed or theft on that around the 29th of August or has any information, to contact them. And let's find the perpetrator. And it's highly unlikely anyone will be found. There's no CCTV or anything like that. It's just, it's a piece of strong communication. That's the whole point. And words, it's about the words that we use and in the space.
And I think that's really important. You're saying the words that they use. And what really heartened me is that they're using global majority heritage, Black and global majority people. There's no ethnic minorities in there,
Well,
that they have been listening. They have been listening. And that, once they start changing the language, is a step forward. And they're listening. That means they're listening. But let's this says artistic vision, and let's pick up on what was saying Fritz and Frankie was saying about that imagination, that imaginary, and let's think about your childhood.
My childhood.
Your childhood, because that's what another thing that I picked up was like, when we're our kids, we're our purest selves. And for me, nature, childhood, I always put out the message that I came to nature late, but if I look closely, I was in a city, Bradford, brought up, so there were moments of nature within my life, especially this time of year. I used to love walking to school past all the sycamore trees and kicking the leaves. Somebody had spent a lot of time putting it to one side, but I would just kick in my little buckled up shoes. I just loved it, right? So there's moments like that when I know that I was experiencing joy in nature as a kiddie-winkle, and I think I'm spending the rest of my life trying to get back to that pure joy, that pure self of as a kid. So your childhood, was nature part of your upbringing?
I mean, I was brought up mainly in a town, but that was in Kent, but that was on the edge of countryside. But also it had all these green spaces in it. Some of them weren't that safe, commons, and I used to walk through them. And at one point we lived in this place called the High Rocks, which is these ancient rocks used to be below sea level, and it was a strange, kind of amazing place to live for a while. But then being in the town or city felt safer. But I did have this thing with trees, and I did have a sense of always wanting to get away from home and out into the green, out into the hills, out into the forest, because we had the Ashdown Forest, which isn't far from where we live, and we would go there and at weekends, and so we had these spaces that we went to. But as I grew older, I had this whole thing about getting up high. And the other day, so love mountains. When I travel, I always go for mountains. Then when I came back to live from London down here, up on the downs, up top. And recently my brother said to me, because we had a quite difficult, we had a crazy, difficult upbringing. Well, my mum was from Iran, the revolution happened, we had a lot of people coming to stay with us, all kinds of things went on, there was lots of trauma and other things like that. So I'd always get out, and it would all be to a place where I could be in that world, and it was kind of a refuge. And he said to me, oh yeah, when you're traumatized in your fight or flight, you seek the highest place because that's the safest place. I found that really interesting, because I thought, I always feel, when I'm right at the top of the downs, I always feel like the safest now that I've got used to going there on my own. I didn't before. And I realized that I have this reciprocal relationship with it now. And I think it's because when I came and moved to Lewis, but that's about quite a long time ago now, but about 7 or 8 years ago, I started walking with one of the writers who's part of this project called Razia Aziz and her partner Anuja, and we would do this thing called wanderings. So we would wander around the railway land, which is this rewilded, beautiful space in our town. And I learned about meandering and wandering. I was always rubbish at keeping up with hikers and fast walks, and they taught me about being in dialogue and conversation with that world. And that was really the basis for this project, because I wanted to meander and wander with people. So then being asked to do a project set by the Cookmere Meanders, which is a ribbon of water that literally meanders from inland to the sea, I was like, oh. And also I have dyslexia. I always lose my way. I'm always getting sidetracked. And so I thought I'd just work with that and see what I find. And so I used to do that as a child. I'd always get lost. Yeah, and I'd end up by a tree, going, where am I? It's beautiful. I don't know where I am. Or by a lake, or by a... So I had access to nature. And sometimes it was dangerous, and sometimes it was a real refuge and a beauty. And I was a painter, so I did a lot and lots of drawings and paintings that were inspired by that world around me. Yeah.
Thank you. I say wander and wonder. That's because I always used to I still do it now. I used to take different routes to school,
So I could wander and wonder. And I do that when I'm driving or when I'm walking. I like to take different routes. I don't like to go the same route twice or come back the same way because, I could miss something.
It's good for your brain as well.
Oh, yeah.
No,
yeah.
it creates new parts.
No, it is. It's getting old, so I've got to keep it on its toes. But let's think. We're going to ask you you can ask some questions in a minute, right? But this is probably going to be my last one, but it's multi. So we've been talking about access and belonging and history and the landscape and culture. And I think I want to put that in with the idea of the power of audio. Here we are. Yeah. We created the Azadeh podcast to keep the conversation going while we're in COVID. And it was a way of keep sharing our stories and amplifying it. But it was, for me, always is a conversation between two people, because I find that so intimate and direct. So let's think about we're thinking about access and borders and how maybe the power of audio is maybe, I don't know, a ticket or some kind of magic spell that we can to cross different borders, or even, I've talked about palimpsest, those ideas of those different layers and how they can be bleeding through. We've got it on the paper, but then also we've got it in the landscape with the different stratas. And we've got it as human beings.
Yes.
Those memories and experiences that within our bodies.
Yeah.
So the power of audio.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Access.
So obviously this particular landscape of that project isn't that accessible for people who can't walk. Now there's since I started doing that project now, it's finished, but there's a lot more support people, there's trampers and there's things that there's a lot more service-based ways of getting people out and up there. But at the time there wasn't. So when I was first in my role as resident writer, and it was COVID and lockdown, I had this thought I could do one-to-one walk and talk podcasts with some of the writers that I was meeting. It's called The Colour of Chalk, the podcast I did, and it's still out there, and it's still, people come to me through that. So I did one-to-ones with 3 of the writers, and we just walked along the, in fact it is a border, isn't it? The Chalk Coast or around the meanders, and we just had a conversation along the way, but we took in, we kind of brought to the listener the kind of incredible soundscape and our present time responses to the landscape, and then some of our creative work and some of our imaginings and our histories, our heritage, in a kind of a mix into kind of, I think about half an hour, the podcast. And that was it was such a powerful thing to be able to do that. And it was the bedrock for then thinking, I would love to put some stories actually out in the landscape. And the other reason is, but I want them also to be online, because some people will never be able to get there. Maybe not just because it's difficult physically, but also because they might never come to this country or whatever. So isn't it incredible that you can take a person on a walk and a meander, and you can have these conversations out there, and they can just have it in their ear anywhere in the world? And I know that's a simple thing to say, but it still blows me away, because it's a texture of somewhere that you can communicate with a podcast or with an audio trail so that's why it's all online. Both those things are all online. And also the idea is that it might inspire people to one day discover it in their own way. And I think it is really powerful. And that's why I didn't just produce an anthology or a book. I thought it needs to be people's voices, because all the projects, all the pieces written for Alinah were recorded by the writers. And that was important, that you hear these different kinds of voices that you might not normally encounter, because they weren't, that was missing, really. It's been missing. And as someone who's written for the page and been in print, and now I'm doing a piece that's going to be carved into wood, for example, up on the downs, some benches further along. It's interesting to see different ways in which you can kind of imprint your work, or your work can be found in that landscape. But I do think audio is an amazing way. And also, it's so democratic. It's a bit like writing, you just literally need a pen and a notebook and you can write. And now we've got phones, and yesterday with the production day, it's like it's this very democratic medium, which I think is really brilliant, particularly for bringing people in those kinds of spaces and asking, interesting questions about how they feel about being there.
Well, it's all
and
about
who they
connection. It's all about connection.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we've got a few minutes, I think, for some questions, if anyone would like to ask. Oh, yes.
It's fast, yeah.
I want the...
Yeah. I guess my question would be around the reception of the pieces, apart from that most recent incident, and if you've had any feedback from people who have walked the trail and how it maybe has changed or impacted the way they experience the landscape through listening to the audio along the way.
I have to say, up to this point where this thing happened, because we did a whole kind of year more or less of going out and performing, talking, and bringing people along with it, is really, really positive. And also, it was just that some of the comments were just around, I'd never actually thought about the landscape through the lens of my own heritage or past before. No matter where they were from, they had that sort of, they start to think about that. How does that influence the way that the lens that I'm looking at this place through? Also, one of the most interesting things was how shocked people were that there were people in the room who didn't feel comfortable, hadn't felt welcome by virtue of their race in that space. It never occurred to them, right? So it's like a total blind spot. And so, because the idea is a welcome, it's a welcoming piece. It's like you can be here too, and you have stories too, and they matter, and all that. So that was really, so that sparked some really interesting conversations. And I think that's a conversation that's going on across the country and the world in a way as to which spaces, places of belonging, because nature, or the modern human world, doesn't judge you, right? So this is a human conditioned thing, and it's embedded in, a deep history of, particularly the UK being, 92% no right to roam private land. And so, subjects, not citizens, not like Scotland where you can just wander around. So there is something around the actual land and who owns it that I think it's based on. And the national parks, unlike in America, they were based on the acts of trespass, right where you're from, right? The Peak District. No,
Northumberland.
Northumberland. Sorry, wrong.
Yeah.
But so they kind of have a radical baseline. So this idea of landscape for all, trespass, and all of that, I think people could kind of relate to this as a bit of a cultural trespass. What we're doing, it felt a bit like that, but overwhelmingly positive, inspired, because it's high quality work, and it's not just about the people that are writing it. It really is about the quality of the literature. So yeah, it's been good. So this one thing won't ruin that.
No, but that's what I was just going to say. If we flick it, we could see that that act that was done from hate has actually made the park stand more firmly with you. And if we keep continuing talking about it, it's going to be sharing that work far and wide. It is back in the landscape. It's sending a message that you cannot erase us. Yeah, you knock us down, still I rise. Yes, thank you. Any other questions? Please come to the mic. It doesn't go far.
I'd love to. Alinah, I think the work that you've been doing is absolutely amazing. I want to say thank you as a fellow artist as well. And I'm just interested to know, how has your work impacted on your grown up children? What do they feel about what you're doing, and how have they responded to it, and how has it impacted them?
I can't speak for my kids, but they came, since they were little, I've been doing art projects. Another project Mum's doing, but and they came to the launch, and they've been, it's been so much part of their lives, I suppose. And yeah, pride, I think they are proud. And also my daughter, who's an artist, my son is into acting, my daughter's an artist, her artwork, she's just come out of foundation, and she's having a year out. But and she's interviewed me as part of that. We've had sort of this whole dialogue around the heritage, but also she had a whole project inspired by nature. She followed fashion textiles pathway. She did an amazing piece inspired by Seven Sisters. So she went out as well, came out, and then I looked at Komarebi, which is the glimmer of the way that the patterns that light casts on, did a piece. So it's all enmeshed, it's all part of it. And also because I would always say, I'm going out to Valley now. I've got a Valley near our house. I'm going out to Valley now because I need to get away and I need to talk to the trees or whatever. They then start to do that, right? So it's like one of the habits they have. I'm going out to Valley now. I need to get away. And then they'd come back and she might have written something or they have a reflection. So it's like passing that, what I think is a very positive habit down, which was initially like, I've got to get away, to like, I know, but it's a really beautiful plan. We go together. They got walking boots now. So I think that is a nice little bit of legacy, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like, at one point it used to be, we're going out in the rain again. But now, because they're old enough, they can opt in, and it's like, I don't mind. So they do sometimes opt in together, but they tend to also go out on their own, which I'm really pleased to know that they, there are many things I may have passed them who aren't so great, but it's a good one, Yeah.
I think that's really good because, as I said, I didn't think I had nature in my childhood, but I made sure it was in my kids' childhood. And now they do go out hiking or camping by themselves, with their friends. Yeah. And I think it was more important because there was a break between my parents and me and their relationship with nature. My dad was an immigrant from Trinidad and Tobago, and he came at Bradford, and he put everything rural, countryside back. It wasn't part of his life. It was the big city, big lights, get your job, and that was seen as backwards.
Yes.
Being in the rural landscape. And that's where I feel my gap is, because nothing was passed on, and I've missed out on that. So I don't want that to be for my kids. So I'm trying to pass that on to my kids. And, they did complain, but, it's good for you. It's good for you. More questions, anyone? I'm looking at the time.
Yeah.
But is that a question, Frankie? No. Oh, okay. Anyone else? Okay, well,
just to say, if anyone wants to go and walk that route, there are some maps here. Ooh. And you can go online to the Seven Sisters We Hear You Now and look it all up. Question. Yeah, one more question. What is it?
One more question.
Yeah.
Imaginings, future. What's on the cards for you?
Oh, me?
Yes, you. Yes, you. Not like what you're doing for other people.
Oh, yeah.
Not bringing communities together, not being an activist, but you.
Oh, okay. Well, I am going on a walking journey, and not in this country, but to another coastline. But I'm not being very public about that yet. But
Don't have to be.
So, but follow me on my Substack and you'll find out. No, I'm going on a walking journey to another coastline, and I will say, it's fine because it's to say, I'm going to go to, because this December is 20 years since the Boxing Day tsunami in which my mother passed away, which is what brought her ashes brought back to Seven Sisters, and there's a link. And in some of my stories, I very obliquely reference that, this idea of transculturalism and then far off shores. And so I'm going to, hopefully, if I get the funding, with my daughter, who was 24 days old when she died, we're going to go and do a joint project, walking along that coast and documenting it in some way. So that's what I'm sort of brewing, called Meeting the Water. So do follow, and I wasn't going to talk about it up until November, but it's all right to mention it with you because it's all good.
You're in a safe space.
Safe space. And and because I think that's quite a powerful form of climate storytelling, which is what I'm interested in, bearing witness to the changes and just more personal stories of not just what's lost, but restoration and recovery, because that's 20 years and a lot happens in 20 years, right? And also that joyous reclamation of the space. Because my mum wrote me a postcard, which I got the day, a few days after everything happened, which just said, we've got to come back here with Delia, with my daughter. It's the most beautiful place. We've got to come back as a family. And I thought, I never want to go there. I'm never going there. But actually, it became really clear this year that I need to go back. And actually, that could be, maybe it'll be difficult, but also there's something in there that's around hope. Yeah. So it's that's the next walking journey.
Alinah, thank you so much for sharing that. That's beautiful, beautiful. And it's and both the grief, but then also the joy.
Yes.
The joy. And stories. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your stories with us this afternoon. Let's hear it for Alinah, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. It's been a pleasure. Anytime. Keep it going.
I think we should do the break now.
Yeah.
Can you tell them what's happening next? Frankie.
Yeah, Candy, thank you for such a beautiful and powerful conversation. Can we have one more round of applause? Absolutely amazing.